AITAH for calling out my mother's lie. When I was a kid, my mother was always the center of attention. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and everyone would instantly turn to her, hanging on her every word. She told stories with so much detail, so much passion, that people forgot to question whether they were true. But I knew the truth. I'm 18 now and have spent most of my life watching her weave lie after lie, carefully crafting a version of herself that was more glamorous, more tragic, more deserving of sympathy than the reality. She lied about her job, about her health, about our finances, even about my dad who left years ago. Every time someone asked, the story changed. Sometimes he was an abusive monster, sometimes he was a reckless gambler, sometimes he was a tragic hero who died young. The truth. He's alive, remarried, and wants nothing to do with her because of the chaos she created. Her favorite audience for these lies was always me. At family gatherings, she'd smile sweetly and say, "Isn't that right, sweetheart? Tell them." And I would nod because correcting her meant punishment. Silence became my survival. Until last month. We were at my cousin's graduation party. Everyone was drinking, laughing, and then someone made a joke about how hard it must have been for my mom to raise me alone. She sighed, pressing a hand dramatically to her chest, and said, "Well, you know I battled cancer when she was only 10. The doctors said I wouldn't make it, but I did for her. My blood turned to ice. She never had cancer. She never even had a health scare. I remember exactly what happened when I was 10. She was fired from her job for stealing from the register, and we had to move in with my aunt. That was the year I learned how to pack up everything I owned in a trash bag in less than 10 minutes. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the years of swallowing her lies. Maybe it was the smug way she looked at me like she knew I wouldn't dare contradict her. But this time, I did. "That's not true," I said loudly. The table went silent. "You didn't have cancer. You got fired. We moved in with Aunt Kelly because you stole money from your job." The air went electric. My mom's face drained of color, then flushed red. She laughed too loud, too brittle, and said I was confused and misremembering. But the damage was done. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, they were all staring, whispering. Some believed me immediately. Others looked at me like I'd just committed some unforgivable betrayal. The party ended quickly after that. When we got home, my mom unleashed hell. She screamed until her voice broke, called me ungrateful, evil, a liar. She swore I had embarrassed her in front of the only family who still cared. She locked herself in her room, crying so loudly the neighbors could probably hear. The fallout has been worse than I imagined. Some relatives have stopped talking to me, saying I shouldn't air dirty laundry or attack my mother in public. Others have quietly reached out to say they always suspected she was lying but never had proof. My mom, meanwhile, has doubled down. She's telling everyone I'm mentally unstable and needs help. I keep replaying that moment at the table. Her eyes, the silence, the way the room shifted after I spoke. Part of me feels guilty, like I ripped off a mask she wasn't ready to take off. But another part of me feels relief, like I finally broke a cycle of silence I'd been trapped in my whole life. Still, she's my mom, and I can't shake the fear that maybe I went too far. So AITAH for calling out my mother's lie. After that night at the party, nothing was the same. At first, my mom ignored me, retreating into her room for days, leaving meals untouched, pretending that I didn't exist. But that silence was only the calm before the storm. She began a campaign subtle at first, almost invisible if you weren't paying close attention. She started with my family. Phone calls, texts, casual comments at gatherings. I'm so worried about her, she would sigh in front of relatives. She's been acting strange, saying things that aren't true. I just don't know. What's happening to my little girl? Some relatives nodded politely, bought into it, sent me sideways glances. Others whispered warnings in my ear. You need to tread carefully. Mom's been telling everyone a different story. At school, things got worse. Somehow, she had reached out to a teacher I'd always trusted. The next day, the teacher pulled me aside. "Your mom called me," she said, her voice tight. "She's concerned about you." about your behavior." I felt my stomach drop. I tried to explain, but the teacher didn't seem to know how to respond. By the time I left the conversation, rumors were already starting to swirl. Even friends I'd had for years began to hesitate around me. Subtle questions like, "Are you okay at home?" or "Did your mom tell you to say that?" The suspicion stung worse than outright attacks because it meant I was slowly being isolated. And then came the most devastating blow: social media. My mom posted a long, carefully crafted message on Facebook. It didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew. She wrote about how children sometimes forget the sacrifices their parents make, twisting memories to suit themselves, and how it's heartbreaking when your child's imagination turns into falsehoods. The post went viral among our small community. People commented with sympathy, offering support to her, questioning my integrity, calling me ungrateful and disrespectful. For weeks, I felt like I was disappearing. My voice had been erased. Even when I tried to defend myself, the backlash was immediate. People assumed I was exaggerating or lying because my mother's stories had always been so convincing. But I refused to be silenced. I started documenting everything: old photos, receipts, emails, text messages, anything that proved what actually happened over the years. I sent copies to close family members who had been unsure, explained situations in painstaking detail. I even made a private journal of every lie she had told, every manipulative tactic she had used, every instance of emotional coercion. It didn't stop her. She escalated. She began showing up unannounced at my school, whispering to teachers in the hallways, attempting to influence counselors, spreading rumors that I was rebellious and unstable. She tried to manipulate my father, who had stayed distant after the divorce, into believing that I was unstable and needed guidance. I felt trapped. Every step I took, every move I made, was being watched, analyzed, twisted into a story that painted me as the villain. My home felt like a minefield. I couldn't trust casual conversations, couldn't post anything online without her potentially using it against me. And yet, in the middle of all this chaos, I discovered something unexpected. I was stronger than I knew. Every lie she told, every attempt to control me, only made me more determined to speak the truth. I started standing my ground, calmly correcting people when they questioned me, presenting evidence when necessary, refusing to back down. Slowly, some friends and relatives began to see through her web. Some even came to me privately, apologizing for doubting me. But the betrayal cut deep. The woman who had raised me, who had promised to love me unconditionally, had used her authority and our shared history as a weapon. And the hardest part was knowing that there were people who would always believe her, no matter what I said, no matter what proof I showed. I began to understand that betrayal isn't always about strangers or enemies. Sometimes it's the people who are supposed to protect you, your parents, your family, who can hurt you the most, who can make you question your own reality, who can turn your own world upside down. Now, I'm learning to navigate that betrayal. I've distanced myself from her where I can, built stronger connections with those who actually see me, and am slowly reclaiming my voice. Every day is a battle, but with every battle, I feel a little more like myself again. Because in the end, betrayal isn't just about what someone does to you, it's about how you respond. And I refuse to let her lies define me. After months of carefully documenting everything and standing my ground with friends and family, I thought I had stabilized my life. I had my small circle of allies who saw the truth, a sense of control over my own story, and a quiet determination to keep moving forward. But my mother wasn't done. Not even close. It started subtly at first. Packages arrived at my doorstep, books I didn't order, letters without return addresses, things meant to unsettle me. Each one carried a cryptic note: "Are you really sure about your memory?" Or "Don't let the world see what you're becoming." She was testing me, making me second-guess myself. Then came the calls. Long, late-night conversations where her voice was soft, almost loving, until suddenly it snapped. She'd accuse me of betrayal, of being ungrateful, of trying to destroy her life. She made me feel like I was the one spiraling, the one hurting others, the one incapable of truth. I tried to block her. She found ways around at different numbers, friends' phones, even emailing my teachers, bosses, and distant relatives. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a detailed, falsified account of my supposed erratic behavior sent to my college administration, claiming I was unstable and needed oversight. I was terrified. My grades, my scholarships, my reputation all on the line because of her obsession with controlling my narrative. I realized then that this wasn't just a mother-daughter conflict anymore. This was a full-blown war, psychological and social, designed to isolate me, intimidate me, and force me to submit to her lies. The next escalation came in person. She appeared at a local cafe where I worked part-time, approaching me with a fake smile. She spoke to the manager first, pretending to be concerned for my well-being, then cornered me in the back room. "Everyone thinks you're crazy," she hissed, leaning in close. "Do you want to prove them right?" I didn't flinch. I told her, calmly, that she wasn't welcome and left the cafe shaking but standing tall. My manager later confirmed that she had been trying to manipulate them, trying to set me up. Even so, the fear lingered. Every shadow in my apartment felt like her. Every phone call or notification made my stomach drop. She had turned my world into a minefield. And then, the ultimate betrayal, she began twisting my father into her weapon. He had stayed distant for years, but she contacted him relentlessly, sending manipulated messages and fabricating events to make me look reckless, disrespectful, and ungrateful. For a brief moment, I felt utterly alone, my own parents seemingly against me. That was the night I realized I had to act decisively. I started seeking legal counsel, explaining the harassment, stalking, and manipulation she had perpetrated. I began filing restraining orders, documenting every interaction, and gathering witnesses. It was grueling. She fought back at every turn, hiring lawyers to threaten me, sending lawyers letters to my college, my friends, even strangers she had manipulated into thinking they were doing the right thing. She had transformed from a mother into an adversary, weaponizing her charm, her lies, and our shared history to try to destroy my life. Yet in the darkest moments, I also found an inner resilience I didn't know I had. Every time she tried to break me, I learned to rebuild faster, stronger. I realized betrayal doesn't just hurt, it teaches. It forces you to understand who you are, who you can trust, and how far you'll go to protect yourself. The battle isn't over. She still calls sometimes, sending letters and emails, sometimes so cleverly disguised that I almost doubt myself. But now I respond with evidence, with logic, with documentation. I refuse to bend. I refuse to let her rewrite my story. And slowly, painfully, I am reclaiming my life, my relationships, my reputation, even my sense of safety. I have learned something harsh. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers or enemies. Sometimes it comes from the person who should protect you most. And surviving it requires not just courage, but relentless persistence. Even if it takes years, I will win. And when I do, it won't just be a victory over her, it will be a victory for myself, for truth, and for my own life no longer controlled by lies.